everybody, and welcome back. You are listening to Joygasm, a video game and movie podcast. I'm Russ, Xbox Live Toaster 360. He is Steve, Xbox Live Stevevich. And we have reached the end of time in episode 232 today, July 15th, 2021. We're going to be going right into our topic of the day, but before we do, make sure you bonk that subscribe button. Maybe throw an enchantment on that notification bell. That way you will not miss a single episode of Joygasm, which drops once a week, every week. Our topic of the day is the Loki Season 1 review. You may or may not recall that in a not too far long ago episode of Joygasm, we actually did a review of the first episode. However, we have finally come to its triumphant end in episode 6. And so we thought it would be appropriate to be able to provide our reaction to the entire season. And I can't think of a better time to do it than now, considering the fact that the final episode dropped yesterday. Having said all of that, I do want to warn everybody, a little disclaimer, that we are going into spoiler territory. So if you have not seen the season, or perhaps you haven't seen the last couple of episodes, whatever the case may be, we are going to be talking about lots of different little nuggets. Oh, goodness.
If it wasn't obvious enough,
It is
there
now.
you go.
Yeah. Steve, welcome back to my humble abode.
Thank you, Russ.
You're welcome, Steve. You are so welcome.
I'm glad. I feel welcome.
You should,
I do.
because you are.
That's great.
So, Loki Season 1. I must say, I'm going to start things off here a bit, Steve.
Okay.
I'm going to start things off a bit. I thought that this is the best Disney Plus Marvel TV show yet. When I was thinking about what we've seen so far with WandaVision, with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and now Loki, I think that Loki is hands down my favorite of what we have seen so far. What say you, Steve?
I would have to agree. I thought the same thing before I came over, that out of the three shows that have come out so far, this would be the first of the three.
Ah.
So anybody, I mean, that being said, I mean, I do have some things to say.
I'm sure you do.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure you do.
But anyhow, what are your high-level thoughts of the show?
There was a lot to like, I felt like. In fact, so I was trying to find proper attire since we're going to be talking about the Loki show.
I have no Loki attire.
I know you don't.
Actually, no, I'm very low-key. See what I did there, Russ?
You're not even a dad yet, and you're giving dad jokes. Anyway, this is kind of a funny little, side note. So I was going through a bunch of my laundry and that sort of thing, like different types of heaps of stuff that I've not seen in quite some time. So I was doing loads and loads of laundry. Came across this little jewel, Steve, and I thought to myself, I bet Steve would appreciate this, considering this is one of your favorite games, And then I was thinking to myself, self, the orange color is very much in line with the TVA, the Time Variance Authority. Instead of it saying variant, I just didn't have anything that had the word variant on it. But the orange, right? I mean, can you see what I'm working with over here? I mean, it's no mistake. You got that nice burnt orange kind of look. I even have the lights on the back, little mood lighting as a nice little subtle orange.
Stretch.
Sort of. What are you, wet blanket over here? What is this? Anyway, I had fun. I had fun getting ready. But having said that, Steve, I really did enjoy the series itself. One of the things that I had mentioned prior was that I love the idea of the TVA. I think that is a fresh injection into the Marvel Cinematic Universe arm. I think that it was fascinating to be able to see the kind of the arc that the TVA went on, where it starts out as being like this authority, really. Like you kind of buy into, oh, okay, there is this kind of crazy dimensional authority that, like, you know, as the watch keeper or whatever of all things time oriented. And then by the end of the season, you realize like how this is not all that it was cracked up to be, how like there is an awful lot of manipulation going on. But at the same time, I still didn't lose any like semblance of fascination with it. I still have very much like, I don't know, I look at it and I don't think the TVA has lost any of its luster. So there's that. I also really appreciated the chemistry between Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson, like we've talked about before. But then it was just great to be able to see like what their relationship ended up being like throughout the entire show. And it kept me guessing. Like there are certain parts that I kind of had figured out, kind of, sort of, but at the same time, there were other parts that kind of kept me off kilter, sort of, you know, as a viewer. But so I appreciated that. And I think even when it came to the kind of the main antagonist or the He Who Remains, that I think was one of the strongest endings to a Disney Plus TV show that we've seen yet. And especially in terms of how it plugs into the overall ecosystem of the Marvel Cinematic Universe as it applies to both not only TV shows, but also the movies. What say you?
Yeah, I would say so too. I would say not only him. I mean, well, we only see him at the end, which is kind of somewhat a disappointment because, you know, they were talking about him for about 6 episodes, and then we only see him for like, you know, 15, 20 minutes, and then that's that. So I would like to have seen more. I'd like to know more as well. What they did give us was worthwhile, but you know, we think the timekeepers are evil or the TVA is evil, and then that's not the case, and nor is the other one, and then this other person's evil, and then like the show is over, and then we gotta wait for the next season. So I figured it was kind of done too soon.
It was only 6 episodes.
Yeah.
So, and that's been something that we have commented on in the past about how at least these first seasons really like, I mean, I think we were expecting at least 8 episodes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wonder if that's what Disney Plus is aiming for with these shows is, cause that seems to be a theme with WandaVision. It's not enough, or, they don't really, well, in my criticism, they just didn't do enough with the show. But it was a show to branch off into other shows and other movies of what was going to come out. Same thing with Falcon and Winter Soldier. I mean, there was just not enough there. And once they finally gave us something, we were like, okay, that's it. You know, and it wasn't, nothing was really, well, I shouldn't say nothing was really happening, but the show really didn't get firm traction until like episode 4, for example. So then we were like, okay, we only got a couple episodes left. What are you guys going to do with this? And it's kind of the same thing with this show with Loki, because you know the villain we don't know anything about until, well, we don't hardly know anything. We've learned tidbits, but we haven't been able to connect the dots until the last little minute, and then the show's over. And so it seems like, again, they're setting up other stuff maybe for phase 4, but it's not like this independent show. It's a show that's a vessel to connect, you know, or weave through the other phasing of other shows and movies.
One of the things I wanted to actually touch upon as you're talking about this is this show, one of the unique aspects of the show, I felt like, was this is an exploration of villains, if you think about it, for the most part. Like if you think about how you have Loki, who, again, is probably the most, well, aside from Thanos, he's one of the most famous villains that we've been introduced to so far in the MCU. But then on top of that, then you have the TVA, which, again, the TVA is murky at best in terms of its innocence. You know, it has this kind of one side of it that is extremely manipulative, right? Like, and we come to find out that they have been kidnapping and erasing the memories of these variants within these different multiverses of just different people and creatures and that sort of thing against their will.
And not only that, they prune or they just kill people off on a whim. Like, oh, yeah, prune that one. You know, it's not even like, okay, sorry, you sucked at life and did some bad things and we got to let you go. It's just like, okay, either, the executioner, judge, and jury are all like, okay, next, he's gone. He's proven, no.
Yeah, there's very much a calloused approach that the TVA has, and you can tell has been ingrained in the people who serve the TVA. And it's kind of a trip in the sense where there are all these people who have been conditioned and almost desensitized to do this. And I don't know, I think that was one of the coolest aspects of the TVA, kind of like the coming of age aspect of the TVA, was like how Owen Wilson's character Mobius, for instance, represented how when he all of a sudden realized that he too was a variant, that he was put there against his will, and everything he's come to know is murky at best, but probably a lie, right? That was a reckoning, right? Like that was a moment of reckoning for Mobius, but also too, to your point of what you're talking about, like the pruning and that sort of thing, it was really fascinating to me that his friend, I can't remember her name, but she was kind of the boss around the TVA. She was very much that callousness personified, because here she has clearly some sort of long-standing friendship with Mobius, and she, without hesitation, just pruned him. I mean, I was pretty shocked during that scene. Were you?
I didn't think that was coming at all whatsoever. I mean, they came back. I was kind of like a bit touching, because he, in a sense, knew it was coming. At least I felt like he knew it was coming. I mean, he hangs his head down and he doesn't try and plead for his life or anything. He just starts to talk about their previous conversation, and then, transcends into, what would be pleasant for him. And the conversation about what's fun and what, about the jet ski, the conversation he had with Loki earlier. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds nice. It really sounds like he would be at the high point of his life, or at least a highlight. And
there was a sense of conviction in his voice when he was talking to her, wasn't it? Like when he was saying, you asked me earlier about like the ideal place I'd want to go. I want to go back to my jet ski.
Yeah.
Like it was like, ooh, okay.
Yeah, I want to go back to my life, and all this like revealing of truth. And she just executes him. And I thought, I was like, whoa, I didn't expect that. I mean, that whole episode was probably my favorite episode.
Yeah.
I think that was episode 4.
I think you're right.
Yeah, that was,
because episode 5 they focus on the void, and then episode 6 is when we get introduced to He Who Remains. So yeah,
right.
Yeah, episode 4 was probably one of my favorites as well. Backing up a bit though, so from a high level, like that with like the TVA, I really liked the TVA. I thought that it was a lot of fun. And on top of that too, I really liked this exploration of what a villain is, because there are multiple versions of this. I started talking about Loki. We get introduced to Sylvie, who is apparently like a variant of Loki from a different dimension. Well, I'll come back to her in just a minute, because it could be very easy just to like go off on like a different timeline and talk about something. However, at the same time, like I really also enjoyed some of the other characters, like some of the TVA, like one of the women, she's like the sergeant at arms or something like that. She was very interesting because she appeared to be kind of the enforcer of the TVA, but then all of a sudden she realizes what's going on. And so we see kind of a change up of her interests and value system. And then we see He Who Remains, who's yet another villain in this whole situation. But they all have different types of approaches to being an antagonist. And I thought that was pretty refreshing, because we are very much conditioned as viewers to like expect there to be both protagonists and antagonists. Yet this show was very much an exploration of like, well, what happens if you have mostly just villains?
Yeah. Well, it seemed like a battle of wits with villains too, because they're all into manipulation,
right,
and lies and their own agendas, and their will be done, I guess. So you can't. Loki says you can't trust me, and then he tells Sylvie like you can't trust me, and I can't trust you, and then He Who Remains goes, I might be lying. I might be not lying.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? And then when we meet up with all the other variant Lokis, we're going, are they telling the truth? I mean, they seem like they're pretty darn serious. Like they're just trying to survive. I mean, it's not really about their agenda anymore. It's not about surviving, or it is about surviving. That's all it's about.
Yeah.
So lies didn't really come into play, but it's what I mean. I said it was a battle of wits. That's really what it was. I mean, Loki and Mobius kept on going back and forth, and me as a viewer, I'm going, nope, he's lying.
Yeah.
No, he's lying. He's definitely lying. And, and sure enough, he was. So anyhow, I mean, part of it was interesting, I guess, with all the back and forth. I think part of it too kind of got a little bit wearing. Not wearing, but maybe like I wanted there to be more revelations instead of.
There were quite a few for Loki.
There were some revelations, yeah,
And for Mobius.
but only towards the end, and even in those episodes, I guess maybe all the way up till episode 5, they were still trying to fake each other out in a way,
Well,
like for example, they're in the that room and they're about like briefing each other basically, and and Loki is saying that Sylvie is my girlfriend or whatever.
He didn't say
well,
girlfriend.
he's not. He didn't say. It's the idea that's just coming across, and then Mobius goes, "Oh, we went ahead and killed her," and so they're both just kind of conking heads, not going anywhere.
Well, I think it's more of a play of information, because every party wants certain types of information that they hold valuable to themselves. And really, another aspect to this whole thing is, you talk about revelations. Loki constantly has revelations throughout this entire TV show. I mean, he has a revelation about how the TVA exists. He had no idea that was even a thing. He has revelations about how there are variants of himself that exist. And not only that, he comes into contact with one who's Sylvie, who ends up being kind of the thorn in the TVA side, which was kind of surprising too, because we at first don't know who this variant is, and he has revelations also about how he feels about her, like you alluded to. He also has revelations about the kind of choices you make, because for the longest time throughout the show, he's really obsessed over like ruling over the TVA, because again, that's the old Loki. And at the end of the season, he's the one who's holding Sylvie back from taking out He Who Remains, because he realizes what kind of huge detrimental effects could actually happen if this were to take place. So it's very interesting to see some of the irony in that, but also too, like when it comes to revelations with different characters, like I mentioned, Mobius was another character that certainly had his moment. He didn't have as many as Loki, of course, but I think that there was definitely that huge aha moment. Sylvie, not so much. I would say Sylvie definitely had her purpose and her mission. Like she was absolutely scorned. She wanted to pay back. She would stop at nothing to extract her revenge. So she was a lot more just single clarity of vision.
Right. Now, I didn't mean that he had no revelations whatsoever. I was just saying that, the back and forth between I'm lying to you to get my way. Okay, and here's another revelation. Now I'm going back to lying to you to get my way. Okay, here's another revelation. I just wanted to stick with the reveal of Loki. Here's the consequences of the decisions you've made to lie and manipulate others throughout all the Marvel movies we've seen so far. And now here's 6 episodes for you to come to terms with yourself. Mm-hmm. And yes, that happened, but I wanted more of the revelations and more of him coming to terms instead of him going back to his old ways of lies and manipulation.
But do you think that he went back to his old ways of lies and manipulation by the end of the season? Because I feel like he had a lot of self-discovery.
He did have a lot of self-discovery and towards the end, yes. I mean, but we had to get there for him to basically abandon and let go 100% of how he used to be. Just completely unshackle himself with the lies and the deceit. And now he's really worried about the future. He's worried about the existence. He's worried about the timeline. He's worried about people who actually did care about him, and I mean, he's desperate at that point. But we had to get all the way till the end of the show before that happened.
See, I don't necessarily see it that way. I think, like for instance, in episode 4, he witnesses Mobius getting pruned in front of his eyes, right? And you could tell he was devastated. Like he was not the same Loki as when he first started in terms of not caring what happens to Mobius and that sort of thing. At that point, they had formed enough of a rapport with each other, and even perhaps like this kind of dare I say friendship, maybe more of like a bond over some sort of common goal. But there was remorse and mourning for Mobius when that occurred. That was a pretty big deal. And I think too, to a certain extent, I think that Sylvie had the same kind of thing when Loki got pruned in front of her, because he was about to tell her something, then it happened to him. So again, I think that when it comes to the show, granted, it wasn't like from episode 1 or 2 on that like all of a sudden Loki is a changed character or anything like that. And that's kind of the purpose of the show, right? Is like we, up until the show, have identified Loki as, okay, he's this god of mischief, right? Like he's this person who's known as a villain, that sort of thing. But what's beyond that? Like, how can we bring out these other types of personality traits and perhaps decisions that we would not have guessed that Loki would necessarily make? And I think that was one of the big refreshing things about the show overall, was how it was like this constantly evolving situation that it's literally like as if like the characters were like these little like chess pieces on a board, and like they were moving into different situations. They were compromised at times. Other times they had the advantage. And what came of that? What happened as a result?
You're asking me?
No. I was just finishing up my thought.
You look at me like, you know what I mean? That's the question. Like, chess pieces, the pawn and the knight, and then you have a rook and a bishop, and
King
then.
Oh wait, that's checkers.
That's Burger King. I'm hungry.
But yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun. I don't remember who the token character was. What its name was. The little cartoony like.
Oh, Minutes.
Was that the name?
Miss Minutes or something like that.
Miss Minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah. I always found that character to be pretty entertaining and interesting, and I liked how they did not overuse the character. And at the same time, like, she was kind of creepy by the last episode, like when she starts bartering with Loki and Sylvie when they enter into He Who Remains' dojo.
Well, that plus, like, whenever she popped up, there was supposed to be some TV screen or a device nearby that was basically projecting her. And so when they walk into this castle of sorts, she just kind of appears out of thin air. And so you kind of thought, okay, is this just a figment of their imagination? I mean, are they really here? Is this all in their minds? Are they going to pop up someplace else?
Right.
I mean, because there's nothing really computerized except for what the dude had on his wrist, kind of that watch thing that he kind of flicked out some, clay looking digital. That was really cool. Figurines, yeah.
I really liked how that was part of his obligatory storytelling, his exposition of what was going on. And I got to say, too, that was also pretty impressive when you think about how he only had one episode.
Right.
I mean, like He Who Remains, which, by the way, I did some research on that, and the other name for him is Kang the Conqueror.
All right.
Who's a known villain in the Marvel universe. He's one of those like time traveler types.
One of those bad guys.
But anyway, I was really impressed with how the actor only had one episode to introduce himself, explain kind of the purpose of him existing and the threat that was there. And I got to say that I think that a lot of the success goes to the writing. Like if you think about like what all was covered and said in that last episode, like there really wasn't very much action at all. It was much more that kind of like tension in the room, discovery of what the heck is going on kind of thing. And I felt that the persona that the actor actually put forth for He Who Remains, I thought was really fresh. It was pretty very different from what we've seen so far.
It was, and I think he had to be that way because we've seen villains who are, big, burly, and bad, and act as such.
Yep.
And we've seen villains who use their intelligence and wits to try and outsmart. But we haven't really seen somebody who is kind of, I'm looking for the word, but a little bit wily, a little bit cuckoo.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't about to kill Sylvie and Loki, even though he probably could. I mean, we didn't really know what kind of powers he had other than he was kind of dipping himself all over the chronology of time altogether,
Yeah.
But we don't know what else kind of, what other kind of powers he had.
Well, and let me stop you really quick. I thought that was interesting too, how he gave them basically two options as to what they could do. And he just sat back and let them decide what they ultimately would do, which is very different from what we have seen from other villains like Loki and Thanos. Like, I mean, they're not about to just sit back and let someone murder them like that. And I thought it was also interesting too about how it was all about consequence, how He Who Remains was talking about, look, these are your two options. And these are options that really he's like, I've looked at all these different scenarios. This is what you can do. You can either take over because basically I'm burnt out from dealing with all this stuff, or you can just take me out. However, if that happens, then all the other variants of me will be unleashed. And that was a part of his big story, right? Was how, back in the day, how there were all these different variants of him and they waged war and they caused all kinds of chaos and pandemonium among all these different multiverses. And so he was basically the last one from all of those different versions. But apparently, if he gets killed, then it opens Pandora's box.
Which is kind of odd storytelling.
It's supposed to be odd, Steve.
Well, that's the thing. It's okay, so he's burnt out, but he's been enjoying playing with time.
He has.
Throughout generations, hundreds, thousands of years, and all of a sudden now he just doesn't want it. But I mean, he's like, okay, cool, kill me. But then he goes but then he says, reincarnation.
Right.
I'm coming back.
Uh-huh.
So if he's A-okay with coming back, then why would he be and to maybe splice the timeline in different ways? Why would all of a sudden he be burnt out? Unless of course that was just another lie, and that was part of the scheme all along. Was he already knew how this whole thing was going to play out, and wanted to basically fix the timeline anyway.
So he did talk about how he knew precisely what was going to happen up until a certain point,
right,
which was really cool. And I love, by the way, the delivery that the actor gave. You could tell the camera's slowly dollying in, and he's kind of just biding his time as Loki and Sylvie figure out what kind of course they want to take. But then there comes a moment where he's like, there's this realization that comes up, and I love it because to me it was just powerful. It was just oh, okay, something has transpired. And I think in terms of his character, right? So because he has been doing all kinds of time travel and has been weaving all these different timelines, stuff like that. Anytime I think of characters that deal with time as a general rule, I think of them as probably a little beyond eccentric. They've probably lost or maybe have a couple of marbles loose, because having that kind of knowledge and knowing what's going to happen and all that kind of stuff has got to mess with you on some sort of mental level.
Sure.
And I think in terms of Kang, I think that he has nefarious purposes. I think that we haven't seen the end of what his grand plan is going to be. I have a feeling this is a kind of character that really enjoys making everyone else's lives miserable through the act of bouncing around through these multiverses and time travel and that sort of thing. And so I don't think that we've seen the end of him by any stretch. In fact, I know for after reading some articles today that apparently he's supposed to come back, I believe, in the Doctor Strange movie sequel, like Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness.
There you go.
Amazing how that ties together. But I also think, too, that there will be more emphasis placed on some of the other movies, like the new Ant-Man and I always forget what that word is. It's the
Wasp?
No, not Wasp. What's the contraption that he goes into? It's golly, I could like see it. Quantumania. Thank you, Steve.
You
saved me.
Solace?
No. Ant-Man and Quantumania or something like that. Anyway, I have a feeling that will play a role. And there was one other one that skips the brain at the moment. But very original in terms of how they set up his big reveal and what Loki and Sylvie were faced with. What did you think of like how everything kind of played out in that whole sequence?
So my one question is, he's saying, you're trying to kill me and you can't. And this is why, because I've seen it all happen. And he kind of shows like books of scripts and what they're all going to say.
Yeah.
And so he would have seen at some point that this is where the dialogue ends and this is the limit of my sight. I can't see what's going to happen at this point. So that would have been the realization for him of, okay, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I don't know what you're going to say now. That's what I would have expected for a guy with as much knowledge as him. But how they played it out is, I don't know what's happening anymore. I don't know. I heard some thunder and this is all truth to me now. I thought, okay, well, you knew that, what everybody's actions were. You said you paved the road because you knew this was
up until a point.
Right, up until a point. But he knew when that point was.
Yeah. Yeah, he knew the exact moment of when he would stop knowing precisely everything that was going to transpire. And I think in a way that excited him because he had been, who knows how long, had been in the position of just constantly knowing everything. Yeah. And I think it was like one of those like, I don't know. I think it what the word is, but like, it's like he got excited, but also it was just one of those things where like it's like something he hadn't felt in a long time, and it was just one of those things that's like, oh my, this is back again. Oh, give me some more, please. Thank you. So
hot and bothered. Here's what I think too, and this could just be me, but the models that he used to show basically what had happened in the past with the variants of himself had what looked like to me that some art that the Japanese use, where they'll take a vase and they'll break it, right?
Oh.
But they'll take the seams of where all the broken shards are, and they'll put like gold or silver or some sort of lining in it. And so they'll reconstruct the vase with all the broken pieces, but it'll be reconstructed better, I guess, and harder, not as fragile. And so to me, it looked kind of like how that was. I don't know about. I could be totally way off the timeline. But because it was weaved through the castle also, where it looked like it was broken and put back together. And then in the models he was showing, like with the timeline, it was broken and kind of put back together. Some places were dark, other places were gold. To me, that's what it looked like, which would kind of make sense if he's been playing with the timeline throughout history and throughout all these generations and years that, okay, well, now here we are again in this loop that goes around, from where it starts, it's going to end in the second part or that same spot it finished. And then it's going to continue on again. And I think, maybe that might have some significance, not the whole art thing, but just like the semblance of breaking, putting back together,
symbolism,
making it stronger, making it right.
No, that's brilliant. I had no idea. I keyed on that whole kind of design aesthetic that they were going for, but I had no idea that was a thing. So really cool observation. And it makes a lot of sense just because we come to find out that his character is all about threading these different types of timelines and having variants or lording over these different variants and that sort of thing. So really, really fascinating stuff. And another thing too that I still have a lot of fun thinking about is the TVA itself is a concept that I still have a very peripheral understanding of. It's not necessarily a thing that like I am an expert by any stretch, but I still don't quite understand why he needed the TVA. I mean, I guess just to kind of do his bidding and help him out with certain things with regards to like maintaining his vision of what he wanted to have happen or not happen, that sort of thing.
I almost think like the TVA of sorts, but the TVA along with he that who remains. I think they needed Loki more than Loki needed them. I think Loki wound up there, but that was, and he had to make the best of the situation and the circumstances. But I think he was looking to rule over something, and because he was there and found that a lot of things of consequence from the world he was at before, like the Infinity Stones, meant nothing there, but he could have all this power, maybe take it with him to another world and rule there. Like that's what he wants. Ultimately, is just to rule something.
Right.
He's the king of nothing right now. So he wants to be, he's always felt that he was the rightful heir to Asgard. But I was about to say Isengard.
Isengard. No.
Oh man.
Goodness.
Let me ask you about the fight sequences, like the old punch and kick.
Yeah, sure.
Do you think those were as good as they could have been, Russ? Or do you think they were a little bit too choreographed?
Oh, I would say they're probably a bit too choreographed. I think that it is a little odd when you have these characters with swords in an environment where, well, I mean, to be fair, like it wasn't like the TVA had submachine guns or something. I mean, they also had melee weapons to a large extent. Yeah, I mean, I would say it did kind of at times feel a little Shakespearean,
right?
In a way,
like it was a play or something.
Yeah, like I mean, I get it. Like you have Norse gods, and even their delivery of the lines and stuff, and it makes perfect sense. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it necessarily bothered me. But I mean, having said that, I think it would have been cool to have seen them utilize more of like their magical side. Yeah. Budgets.
Yeah, I was thinking, it really dawned on me, and not so much on like the earlier episodes, but the later episodes where there was a lot more fighting going on. It did seem like you're gonna throw a punch here, I'm gonna dodge it this way, or you're gonna throw a kick, I'm gonna duck, sort of thing. And it was just a bit too slow, not as fast as like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, for example, or maybe some of the old other Marvel movies. But I just kind of thought, and my wife picked up on it too. She goes, are they throwing punches kind of slow to you? I'm like, yeah, kind of. I don't know. It was a little bit distracting.
Sure.
That's all I'm trying to say. I'm just a little bit distracted. I didn't know if you noticed the same thing.
A little bit, but not. It wasn't like it threw me out of the overall experience or anything like that. So I actually really liked what Owen Wilson did with his character. I thought it was really, really cool. I know that we've kind of gone back and forth a little bit talking about some of the things that his character Mobius did, but we haven't talked about when he reconfronted his boss / I don't know if it's still friend or not, but it was really interesting seeing that scene. For me, I felt as though I think that they should have done more with that scene in terms of kind of like that confrontation, just because we've been sold throughout the entire season about how these two colleagues, basically, I mean, they're tight, right? Like they've been through a lot together and worked together for a long time. They have this rapport and that sort of thing. And I mean, like, if I were to put myself into Mobius's shoes, like there would be a pretty intense confrontation with that, where it's like, yeah, what you did, yeah, that was really messed up. And, you know,
That's all I'm going to say. You're stupid.
I'm going to leave now and let you dwell on
I'm going to let you think about that for a few minutes.
Anyway, I did think that was a little bit like I liked how Owen delivered the lines that he did have, but at the same time, I really like it was too quick to like all of a sudden pivot where like she started kind of getting snippy with him again, and actually, well, now that I'm talking about it, she's an interesting character in the sense that I can't really like wrap my mind around whether or not she's trustworthy or if she is basically keeping her cards close to the chest or vest, because she literally wore a vest. So that's one of the other things too that I think is kind of interesting about the show, is that she ends up departing. She goes off somewhere. She doesn't tell Mobius where she's going, but at the same time, it's not like she owned up to her past transgressions. She definitely has her own motivations, I want to say. And that was a reoccurring theme too, was both Sylvie and I can't remember the character's name, but basically Mobius's boss, they both kind of shared that, right? Where like they had this kind of single clarity of vision, purpose of what they were supposed to do versus their male counterparts of Loki and Mobius, who they've kind of gone on this journey and they've emerged kind of changed forever.
Yeah, I just think that everybody in the show who had the slight shadow of villainy had their own agenda, basically. I mean, you couldn't tell really what anybody was going to do. They were shining everybody on. Everybody was shining each other on. I mean, the only really honest character, I guess, for the most part, was Mobius. I mean, Mobius was pretty frank with everybody, and as long as you got along with him, I mean, he was looking for a friend the entire show.
Well, I don't know if he was looking for a friend, but I think he was, I don't know. I think he had a mission that he was trying to achieve, and so he had this kind of more risky idea for getting to the accomplishment side.
Well, yes and no. I mean, he's always kind of chit-chatting with the guards, and he's, and the guards are kind of giving him a bad time. He's like, oh, I'm just doing my job. It's great. Yeah, I'm Owen Wilson. Or he was chit-chatting with, the judge. Her name starts with a J, I think. I don't know. I have to MDib it or something. Mm-hmm. Or, of course, he wants to be all buddy-buddy with Loki. I mean, he's always trying to have Loki level with him, give him the truth, whatever.
Ravonna Renslayer.
Yeah, J, like I said.
If the J was an R, yeah.
Take the J and you kind of
Ravonna
turn it upside down, bend it a bit.
Renslayer, yeah.
Genslayer.
That's actually really cool. Ravonna Renslayer.
Jirvana.
No. What did you think of like when there was that realization that the supposed ancient timekeepers were actually androids?
I thought I didn't know what was going to happen, honestly, which was good.
Yeah.
But I kind of thought, okay, you're bringing these two troubled individuals, highly dangerous.
These two people are troubled.
And there's no security. And then you're bringing them to the timekeepers who've barely been seen by anybody.
All powerful.
And so you're just going to let them there. And yeah, they're kind of chained up, but let's just see what happens. Of course they're going to try and take them out. I mean, that's what their whole prerogative was.
Yeah, that was pretty predictable. But at the same time, it was one of those story points where I wanted to see it happen. I'm like, yeah, come on, let's do it. Let's see who these are behind the curtain. And I liked very much how they were in fact androids, how it was this whole created thing to kind of keep people in line with the bureaucratic system of the TVA.
But what happened to the other two timekeepers? Like they were, the one got his head lopped off. I'm like, oh, it's an android. And the other two just kind of like sat there and didn't have any other words to say. They did try to interrogate them. Like, what do you know? You're not timekeepers.
Well, no. I think they shut down. I think essentially Sylvie broke the machine system when she lopped off the android head, because the other two obviously were just. I mean, it's like the equivalent of going to Disneyland and like getting on. It's a Small World ride. They're like, it's a small world.
But if you broke the head off one of those gnomes or whatever, like the whole system's not gonna shut down. Like it's like, oh, I just broke the ear off the thing. I didn't know it was gonna shut down the entire contraption. Matter of fact, our canoe's not even moving forward in the water. Yeah, like so.
Well, we're gonna be here a while.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Did anybody pack a lunch?
Yeah. This is awkward. Do you see any of those security cameras anywhere? You gotta wave a lot. You get them to come down here and help us out.
Just a bad time to say I don't know how to swim
in 2 feet of water. I only dog paddle.
Yeah, only dog paddle.
Yeah. Well, are there any other parts of the season that you would like to touch upon before we give our concluding thoughts?
Let me ask you about...
I love it when he asks me questions.
Did it seem like the show was more about Sylvie than Loki to you?
No.
Didn't? Because to me, it kind of did. Like, the show is called Loki because there's a bunch of Lokis. But
the Lokis are kind of like locusts.
But it was almost like Loki himself that we know took a back seat whenever Sylvie was on the screen. Like,
not necessarily. I think that she was given moments to be able to shine and for the viewers to get to know her better. But I also think there are other many moments where it was definitely spotlighted on Loki himself in terms, again, this was very much a transition from what we have come to know about Loki into what phase 4 and beyond is going to bring with regards to his character. And I think there were so many different moments in terms of how, whether it was him discovering the TVA and realizing like him seeing like all of those Infinity Stones in that desk drawer, something that was quite honestly coveted, not only to him, but I think to us as viewers, right? Like anytime we saw an Infinity Stone, an Infinity Stone, it's so rare to find one, and they had it in spades, right? Like the guy even said like, oh yeah, we use it as like, paperweights. Yeah. But at the same time, like, I think one of the things about the show is Loki discovering how there are these variants of himself, like coming into contact. And this is something I wish they explored more of in the show itself.
Oh yeah.
Where like, I started thinking about other types of time travel oriented movies. And that's one of the things that I absolutely adored about the Back to the Future series is that in Back to the Future, there was always this emphasis on how like there's this huge responsibility of like when you use the time machine, you don't use it for personal gain, how there's all these different things in terms of like a butterfly effect that can really screw up like times in the past as well as times in the future. And not only that, but if you were to meet your past self or your future self, they weren't even talking about multiverse self. They were just talking about if you bump into yourself from the past or the future, there's a number of different things that can happen. And so as a result, like there was constantly that underlying tension where it's like, you don't just walk up to like a multiverse self and give him a high five and be like, yeah, okay, cool. Let's go get something to eat. You know what I mean? Like, and I think part of that problem had to do with the fact that they only had 6 episodes in order to tell this story. But
6.
Don't you think it was kind of, I don't know, like
yes, I did, Russ.
It was one of those things where like he got way too used to being around Sylvie. And even later on in the season, when he saw a bunch more variants of himself, it just kind of got glossed over. Do you agree?
Like the whole thing with time travel got glossed over?
No, not necessarily time travel, but just like the idea that there is a multiverse and Loki was literally meeting, like he was having physical contact with other versions of himself. Like it would be as if you bumped into like a multiverse, like from a different, dimension or whatever. It's you, it's Steve. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, you wouldn't be like, oh, come here, let me give you a bear hug. You know what I mean? Like, there would be
best buds.
There would be a lot of hesitation, a lot of, I mean, like what, even on a psychological level, what does that do to you? Because you suddenly realize that you are no longer the only one that exists in the universe. Like suddenly you realize, yeah. I mean, like there is like, I mean, just off the top of my head, I mean, like you have the whole theme of value, right? Like one of the things that we as humans always talk about is how there's only one you, and how like that makes you very special and unique and that sort of thing. Well, if you meet like 10 variants of yourself, I'm sure that's gonna at least pop in your mind a little bit, being like, "Hey, what's this all about?"
Well, I think they may have glossed over that because everybody had already went through their life everybody went through their life and met at one point, and so all this other stuff had happened before, and they all met here. So the point at which they met, it wasn't like, "Oh, Loki." Well, we only have a certain amount of value. Their priorities had changed, and it wasn't really about.
Well, I meant more like self-reflection or kind of looking within.
Yeah,
in terms of like certain things that you had previously thought of as this is how it is, and then all of a sudden that entire foundation is just gone.
I mean, if there was more episodes, then yes. But because they were squeezing everything in, they didn't have time for it. And so if it was glossed over, that was probably purposeful.
Gotcha. Well, tell me your concluding thoughts and rating on the show, Steve.
So I'm a bit conflicted because at one point I just love seeing Tom Hiddleston be Loki. I love seeing him play. He's just the key. When an actor like just confirms the character, epitomizes the character, and they just, I don't know. I love when actors do this, and to me, Tom Hiddleston just does it, and I love seeing him on screen. That being said, it was definitely a step back where it's not the same Loki, I guess, that I'm used to, because what Loki that I'm used to is on a grander scale. I mean, he's taking on the Avengers. He's arranging treaties with armies to try and, I mean, he's doing huge. It's not like, I put a whoopee cushion under your seat and, that kind of mischief. You know what I'm saying? Running through it like a closed door. And so I went into the show thinking, okay, this is the Loki that I'm used to. Here's how it's going to be on the show. It's going to be the same Loki. And it definitely was not. I mean, there's not a whole lot of epicness going on. The fighting is definitely a step back, and there's a ton of talking. Like, that's the majority of the show is there's people sitting and talking at a dinner table. It's people sitting and talking at an interrogation room. People sitting and talking at the lake or outside. I mean, there was a lot of talking.
But did you enjoy the talking, Steve?
I did, but I just wanted there to be more. I mean, there's just a lot of sitting and talking.
More talking? Man. Color me surprised.
Are you?
Oh, yeah.
Anyhow, so I did one more episode at least. And again, it felt like the show was a gateway show and not supposed to be like centered on itself. Like, this was going to be a show just about Loki, forget about everything else. it's just another kind of branch to branch off of in a way, which is kind of in a way a little bit disappointing. Because I think if it was its own independent show, then there would be more episodes.
They have already greenlit, by the way, season 2.
I'm aware.
Okay. Well,
I'm aware.
Just want to make sure that you're aware.
It's like almost in my eyeball. Your fingers. Anyhow, so I'm conflicted with the rating that I would give it because there is so much more that I was hoping for and want, but there's a ton to enjoy. I'm just gonna go with the 3-star, Russ. That's
3 stars.
just as a safe bet.
Safe bet. Very interessante. Muy interessante, in fact.
Would you agree, Russ?
No. Oh. No, we are not simpatico in this regard.
I like when this happens.
No, I think that...
What do you think, Russ?
Well, I was about to tell you till you blasted my eardrums.
I blast your kneecap here. You're going to play little kneesies.
Quit man-spreading, Steve. Anyway.
I gotta.
Ew. Anyway, I really like this show. I think that it's Marvel's best / Disney Plus's best yet.
Yeah.
I think that Tom Hiddleston did a wonderful job carrying the show. I think it was a fantastic opportunity to bring in someone like Owen Wilson, who you and I are both fans of.
Yes.
I think that as a result, we got to see a lot of really entertaining scenarios and situations that they found themselves in. I really enjoyed the whole premise around how you couldn't quite trust anybody in there 100% of the time. Like they all kind of had their own nefarious plan, as I mentioned earlier.
There's that word again, yeah.
Nefarious. But at the same time, I also really appreciated how this TV show moved the entire ecosystem forward. Because, like, I know I've asked myself this question, and I'm sure you have as well as all the other fans. And you have no idea what I'm going to say.
It doesn't matter. I've asked myself.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know I have.
But my whole thing was like, Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame was so big. Like it was such this tent pole experience. And I think we all left wondering what's next. What's going to come up after this whole thing takes place. And I mentioned a few episodes back how I had this theory about how maybe they would start to play in with this whole idea of multiverses and maybe even like timeline oriented stuff. Because they did allude a little bit to that in Endgame. Yes. But I think that as a result of what we have seen here, this is the nice setup, right? Like we've been able to see Loki grow as a character, but also this is the transitionary point for where the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe is going to leap off of. And I think when I compare it to WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, their endings didn't have that. Like if you think about like WandaVision's ending, and again, this is spoiler alert if you haven't watched WandaVision, but I assume you have. But at the end, it's this aha moment of how Wanda was coming to terms with her grief and mourning over the loss of Vision. Again, that works for that particular show and that particular story that they want to tell, but it doesn't have as much of a huge bearing on the ecosystem like this one does. If you think of Falcon and the Winter Soldier's ending, that was a very coming of age story, wasn't it? Where like you had Falcon who then decided to own up and take the mantle as the next Captain America. Again, that kind of thing works for that particular show because that was another question mark that all the fans had is like, okay, who is going to pick up the mantle and be the next Captain America? So they explored that. And I think that was appropriate. But this was the answer, I think, to what we can come to expect in the future phases of the MCU, which makes it exciting because that was kind of something that, if you recall, you and I were talking about with the previous TV shows where it just didn't have that sense of like grandiose, right? Like not that we need something that's epic like Avengers Infinity War, but like in terms of how it plugs into everything else. they seem to be a little bit smaller in scale. And this I thought was clever because it didn't hit you over the face with like, this is like the next Infinity War or whatever, but it was very much like flying under the radar. And if you started to really kind of piece it together, you would all of a sudden have that epiphany and you're like, oh, this is okay. This could be really fun. Having said all that, Steve, I give Loki 4.5 stars.
Oh,
4.5.
Man.
I was very, very impressed and pleased with just about everything in there. If I had one part of critiquing it, it would be that I felt as though they needed to iterate a bit further with Sylvie. I felt like Sylvie at times was a bit too just kind of blinders on, doing her thing. I wanted to see a little bit more, I don't know, a little iteration, creative iteration on that. But other than that, I was a happy man, Steve. I was a happy man. That wraps up this episode of Joygasm. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you enjoyed this episode, we invite you to check out patreon.com/Joygasm, where you can earn exclusive perks and early access to the show. Not to mention, it helps us financially do what we love to do. Also, make sure that you punch that subscribe button. Maybe even, I don't know, what do you think, Steve? Poke that notification bell?
Poke it with your
sword?
Imaginary sword.
Anyway, that way you will not miss a single episode of Joygasm, which drops once a week. You can also do a search for Joygasm TV on your various social media platforms of choice and on Twitch, where we stream our video game adventures live every Wednesday night at 9:30 p.m. Central Time. We and our variants will see you next week.